You are listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, we're talking about 1989's action movie, Action USA.
I think you guys should both go and make hot toddies right now. Do you know what a hot toddy is?
One of my friends had an aunt who was a hot toddy back in the day, if I remember correctly. That's not what you were talking about? I didn't have the headset on.
That's what Todd Bridges referred to himself when he'd go out to like the roller rink when Different Strokes was a big hit.
100%. All right, you're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of the motherfuckers that is your host, Bernie Gonzalez, a fellow motherfucker. Pete Charbonneau, not operating at 100%, but still stalwart.
Fucking yuppies.
Stalwart, steadfast, and ready to talk about a great movie with two Fan2Fan All-Stars, Allen and Jon, who are coming on to talk about a so bad, it's definitely good movie, and a movie that I believe the three of you discovered very recently, and that's Action USA. And I
Thanks to one Bernie Gonzalez, I think we discovered it.
There is no bullet big enough for you, Bernie.
See, but Billy Ray was the only one that really knew where the diamonds were.
Yeah! Hey, Billy Ray, Frankenstein's agree.
Now you have them. And I want them.
Clay Osborne, I'm here to help you.
Get off of me!
Tell him I want the broad back here alive.
Dead! Jump it!
Boss called in Drago. He must want him bad.
That's quite an outfit. When in Texas, I dress like a Texan.
Fight! All right, fight! Find him, goddammit!
Alan, Jon, we were talking about Miami Connection and about Last Dragon. It feels like if there's a Mount Rushmore of rediscovered 80s action movies, Miami Connection is definitely there. New York Ninja, a movie that Pete, you and I have kind of talked about, and maybe we might have to put that in the to-watch queue. I've watched it, certainly something that I would recommend that you give a watch, but I think Action USA, or as it's known in the Philippines, Above the Law, is a movie that is in that thanks to Alamo Drafthouse and like all of these boutique like Blu-ray companies like Vinegar Syndrome that released movies like this, put this back on the radar for people who did not see it. Because my guess is you guys were not walking down the video aisles in the 80s or 90s and saw Action USA, and especially Alan on your end, where you actually worked in a video store. So I'm interested, before we get into the movie, is this something that you guys were at all familiar before I kind of threw it in the text?
In Invasion USA, yes. Action USA, no.
I'm so happy that you brought it up. I know when we did the Miami Connection episode and The Last Dragon, I asked for more of these movies, and Bernie provided so well. My wife and I were watching Action USA last night and just crying, laughing at the whole movie. It's Miami Vice meets Lethal Weapon done by drama kids on a live stage show. I can't wait to talk about the movie, and I'm just, again, so thankful that you have delivered yet another incredibly bad movie to my catalog.
Love it. Miami Connection was a movie that Alan and Jon, I think you had said Pete had introduced you to that movie. So, Jon, first time hearing about Action USA as well?
I have never even heard of this film before. Was embarrassed about that, then was embarrassed to watch it, then was embarrassed after I watched it.
It's got everything you would want for like an 80s balls to the wall like action movie, right? It's got drugs, diamond, mobsters, muscle cars, bar fights, shootouts, explosions, helicopters, people going through glass. perfectly situated tow trucks that are in front of school buses, in front of railroad tracks that allow for jumping of cars, mismatched maverick cops, car chases, even more explosions, and of course, Uzis. I think the only thing that's missing is the ubiquitous 80s henchman, Al Leon. If it wasn't enough for him not being in this, we would have remembered this movie because it would have been on HBO, it would have been on a video store shelf, and we probably would have watched it. But we didn't. But now we did.
You left out, the one gratuitous thing that a lot of boys watch movies for, would grab them off the shelf at the video store. And that's, lots of swear words. No, I'm just kidding. Is the boobs. And what I didn't understand and what I noticed about this right away on watching it on Tubi was they gave it a TV-14 rating. What the hell's TV-14? And why did this fit TV-14?
I think we all would have loved that when we were 14.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can I just for a second here go with I was taking notes as I do when I'm preparing for the podcast because I take this shit seriously. And I write Transformer looking Corvette whipping down a highway, weaving in and out of traffic. This guy's drinking a beer. He seems to only have one.
Did you catch the license plate?
Sleek one.
Sleek. He got out of the car and he has a gun in his waistband. He obviously thinks he's cool. Now there's tits. Now there's thugs. Now he's hanging from a helicopter. There's a poorly concealed ankle rope. He's dropped from the helicopter. Now there's a car chase. We're 9.5 minutes into this movie. 9.5 minutes.
The movie starts and it gives you everything you would want. It does not waste any time. I love the fact that you brought that up because the first time I saw this, okay, this is great because sometimes when you watch these movies that you didn't watch originally the first time around, it's a little disappointing because you're like, oh, now I know why I didn't watch this movie because no one recommended this. I didn't have an older cousin that's like, hey, you got to check out Action USA. Why? Could just watch Die Hard twice? Go watch Lethal Weapon? Like, that's more enjoyable than this. So I was glad that first time I saw this movie, it came with the promise of the movie, which is like just Action USA. I was like, thank you that this movie, at least 9.5 minutes in, Alan, this is what we want. And then it throws you a bunch of curveballs, which we'll have to talk about.
I still have the results waiting from my group of lab techs, but I think that this movie might be the perfect amalgamation of like the Venn diagram between earnest and like in on the joke stuff. Like there's clearly some stuff that's like on the nose, like they're definitely poking fun, and there's other stuff where you're like, is this a joke or are they like being sincere? And when you can't tell between the two, it's like manna from heaven. And this movie has it like in spades. There's sometimes where I'm just like, oh, they're doing that on purpose, and then I'm like, shit, wait, are they? I don't know. But then there's a couple of times when yes, it's pretty clear they are, but then the rest of the movie is just like, I feel. Well, I think we'll get into this too, because I think Bernie, you had kind of prefaced this as this was a movie made by, and I would argue like solely for stuntmen.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Directed by Hollywood stuntman Jon Stewart. It's a woman protected by 2 FBI agents after the murder of her boyfriend, and a bunch of gangsters are coming after her for a bunch of stolen diamonds. The plot really doesn't matter because this whole thing is basically car chase after explosion, after bar fight. That's really what's driving this. And I remember, again, first time I watched it, which was only a few months ago, I just thought every one of these scenes almost operates on its own. It's not really part of a larger narrative. And it just feels like you're watching the equivalent of a portfolio reel for a stuntman. That was me going through the glass in the bar. That was me going through the back of the glass in the car. That was me hitting the truck and being in the car in the explosion. That was me on the bike flying off the bridge on fire. It's like, oh, seems like you've done a few things. We'll hire you for this big budget movie. And then someone's just like, if we just put all these things together and we very loosely put together a plot, we could just release this as a movie. But what would we call it? We just call it Action USA. Why? That's about as deep as this needs to be.
There's so much action and so much USA in this. It's like, I mean, like the title really nails it.
Let's start with the cast. I'm going to throw out some of the characters. You guys chime in with any comments here. We start with our guy, Billy Ray, who seems to have stolen some diamonds from the mobster. And Alan, he's our guy behind the wheel of the muscled out Corvette.
His thing with the gun in the waistband, walking in, drinking the single beer with his hot chick girlfriend. He immediately gets into it with, you're thinking, here's the star of the movie. Right. And then you quickly realize that he's actually like some sort of like spineless pussy who like, you know, like gets this girl into all this trouble and has no intention of getting her out of it or helping. He's just running for his own worthless life.
She tries to save him. He ends up wrecking her Porsche by jumping the school bus. And then when they get caught, he's just kind of like, end of the line, babe.
Motherfuckers!
She wants an explanation, or at least wants to know how she could help in any way. And he's like, I got this. And then he's like, end of the line 2 seconds later.
Did you guys think that was a twist? Is this the hero? Is she the hero? Like, okay, then next thing you know, like you said, 10, 12 minutes in, he takes a bunch of squids to the chest and, you know, does that, you know, like perfectly timed, like pushing himself backwards to fall.
Eat dead, fucker.
You motherfucker!
Were you guys surprised Billy Ray bit it?
Yeah, I was definitely surprised just because of the movies at the time. Usually you get your hero right out the gate, and it seemed like this movie was like full force pushing it into your face. So it just seemed like the two people on the screen in the beginning were going to be the two people that lived to the end of the movie, but it did fool me a little.
I mean, I thought when he fell out of the helicopter, when they finally took the rope off of his ankle, it was so very clear and obvious in all the scenes where they're shaking him from the ravishing Rick Rude and some fat guy holding him by the pant leg out of the helicopter. And
he looked like an Eddie Mercury.
That mustache was a tickler. That thing was a tickler. Yeah, I mean, that guy was just a terrible shot. To John's point about the car chase, I don't think I've ever seen somebody miss from such a close range.
Not one gun was reloaded in this entire movie either, as far as I
or clothing or wardrobe changed yet again.
Yeah, Billy Ray had death written all over him from the jump.
Before we get off of Billy Ray, I mean, we've got to talk about the abbreviated, like, attempted sex scene with like the ADR dubbed voices, because man, that was. I wouldn't say it was my first laugh out loud moment. I think my first laugh out loud moment was when Billy Ray, they're driving and he's like, watch this. And it cuts to the shot of him like unscrewing like the NOS in the Camaro or the Corvette. I was just like, holy shit. I'm like, you can't tell me Vin Diesel didn't see this at some point. It was like, Amelia. So that made me laugh, but nothing screams hot rod driving, man about town with his woman, then pulling his souped up, was it a Camaro or a Corvette? I can't remember. I think it was a Corvette. Whatever.
It's Corvette.
When you pull into the cul-de-sac in suburbia to get to your house, but they get in, she immediately starts throwing herself at him. He's trying to drink his beer while she's throwing herself on him. She takes her shirt off, and then you've got like this incredible dialogue of like, she lifts her shirt up and he's like, those are looking nice. Like, okay, that's that's a line that I guess you could say. And then they're about to fuck, and he's like, let's get to it.
That was my favorite line that in that sequence. On top of the fact that she twice says, I miss you, and you're so bad. Like, she was trying to come up with something extra and just couldn't do it.
When you're recording dialogue, like you're not in the actual scene, like you're overdubbing, like it may be difficult to kind of get into the mood, but just hysterical. Like, he's not even undressed. He's like, get on top, and oh yeah. It's just like,
did you guys find it very strange the way he placed the beer and locked the door? Like, there was just something like, usually in these movies, it's like, we're going to get in the house, we're going to slam the door and be all over each other, and that's what you expect.
Well, John, you got to lock the door so that it's closed, so when the henchmen knock it down, it's that much more dramatic, right?
Yes.
Who the hell are these guys?
Just as a quick aside, and John can attest to this because we grew up together, but the couch that these two are on, we had a similar couch in the basement growing up, and this thing was like fucking sandpaper. So I can't even imagine attempting to have sex on that thing. But I felt horrible for the woman that plays Carmen, because she's like topless on her back on this thing while Rod Shaft is attempting to act and grind his way on top of her. I'm like, and all I could think about was the couch I spent so many nights on a similar couch. I'm like, that's just not that can't be comfortable for
both the movie and the couch were Rod Shaft vehicles.
Perfect transition there, Pete. So the woman who played Carmen was Barry Murphy. I tried to find her online because I had never seen her in a movie before, but she has been in 2 episodes of Walker, Texas Ranger. She was in a 1997 movie called Time Tracers. And then this is where the internet is a wicked mistress. So sorry, Mrs. Murphy, but I found her LinkedIn page. And she did move on from acting in the late 90s to work in a number of different roles. She mainly worked as an admin assistant, and she's now the executive assistant and grant coordinator for the Dallas Safari Club. So shout out to the Dallas Safari Club. Their mission is to ensure the conservation of wildlife through public engagement, education, and advocacy for well-regulated hunting.
Wow, she earned it. She did take that shot to the nose in the first scene.
I was just going to say, I don't think any woman in movie history has taken as many punches as Carmen and kept ticking.
And she doesn't clean up. She just goes.
Yes.
She had blood. She had that ketchup. I think she loved it. Like she sprayed a ketchup packet on her face and she smeared it around. And then she was just like, I want to leave this here. Because it was on her for like 15 minutes. I was watching the timer and I was like, wow, like at some point someone's going to give her a wet nap.
I feel like every main male character in this movie hits her at some point, including her love interest. And I'm not even talking about the boyfriend. We'll get into that with the other characters. But like everyone is hitting this woman. And like you said, like she just kind of like takes it.
One of the people that punches her face is the good guy. That's our man, Clay Osborne.
I'm Clay Osborne.
Our poor man's Riggs. I think that's probably the easiest equivalent. I saw he's been in a lot of movies. So he was in Stone Cold with Brian Bosworth, a movie that I actually popped in recently and watched, and that one holds up. Cliffhanger with Stallone. He was in Batman Returns as the acrobatic thug. He was in, here's the through line, yet another episode of Walker, Texas Ranger. So if you're playing Walker, Texas Ranger bingo, you got 2 shots in. His character name on that one, Trigger Jenks. That's his name. Love it. He was in an episode of Silk Stockings, which of course just makes a lot of sense for some reason. NCIS Los Angeles. I guess he's got a reoccurring role as Mac's uncle in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And then he was also in, this will kind of create a transition here, the 2018 Lethal Weapon TV series. They had an episode called Panama. And that goes into our partner.
What?
That's right. William Hubbard Knight, who played McKinnon, a.k.a.
Call me Panama.
Who always sounded overdubbed, who is the wannabe Roger Murtaugh to our Riggs.
I immediately wrote this down when they did the dramatic entrance into the movie where they just somehow knew to be where they needed to be to save Carmen's sweet ass from ravishing Rick Rude. Freddie Mercury and the fat guy. When they showed their faces finally, the image that popped in my mind was Spaceballs when they get the stunt doubles. They're like, no, it's the stunt doubles. I was like, these guys are stunt doubles for Riggs and Murtaugh or for Sonny and Tubbs.
I'm gonna pull a bit of a deep cut here for music lovers, but the guy that plays Clay Osborne, the Riggs character, like his face kept bugging me because I'm like, he looks like someone, and then there's like the cheesy rock kind of hair metal that would crop up in this movie from time to time. I'm like, oh yeah, he looks like Jeff Tate, the lead singer from Queensryche. So that makes sense. Like, Fish. So like, if he started like humming a few bars to Silent Lucidity at some point in this movie, it would have made total sense.
One of his first movies, Pete, was actually a movie called like Halloween, where he plays Satan's son, who's also the lead singer of a rock band, also all circa like early 80s. Yep. So there you go, Pete.
You can see him perform Operation Mindcrime 2 live on stage off Broadway.
All right, so for William Hubbard Knight, I did check out his IMDb. Looks like he was in an episode of Fresh Prince, Hunter, Hill Street Blues, Baywatch, and the one that I had to note, he played Santa Claus in an episode of Moonlighting. All right, a few other guys. Yeah, we talked about our henchman, who looks like Freddie Mercury. We got our mobster, Frankie Navarro, played by Cameron Mitchell, who's on a treadmill for a second. And I feel like he was in like a lot of 80s.
The treadmill wearing like a full like dress clothes.
Absolutely, yes, 100%. Our Texas bounty hunter with the most 80s name ever in Drago.
I bury people, bitch.
He was a voice actor, and it kind of makes sense when I think about his voice, because his video game credits include Red Dead Redemption.
I saw that, yeah.
We get the FBI boss who ends out, spoiler alert, to be a bad guy, and he's played by an actor that, again, feels like he was in every 80s movie ever, and that's William Smith. And the second I saw him, he had the glasses on. I'm like, I've seen that face before. Of course, he was like the Russian general head soldier in Red Dawn, and he was Conan's father.
Conan's dad, yeah.
Conan the Barbarian, yeah, the Riddle of Steel scene. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Oh my God, William Smith. I feel like you were in every 80s movies that I saw growing up, and here you are in Action USA.
I feel like it was an interesting cross-section of people that were actors and like with the stunt people, because you're like this weird mix of people that were like professionally know what to do, like how to deliver a scene, and then you've got like the other people trying to act, and so there's like this weird mishmash of just like throwing shit in there. But it doesn't really matter in the end because this movie's so dumb and entertaining. Like you don't really need to be a master thespian in this, but it's always funny to see people that have a long acting career like Ross Hagen and Cameron Mitchell like doing their thing compared to some of the other more fresh faces in this movie.
I feel like the mob boss was like the unfunny Rodney Dangerfield, because didn't they show him like a couple times with hot chicks, once in the hot tub, but he just never had anything really interesting to say.
Yes.
I feel like his scenes are like really not even needed in the movie.
Agreed.
Yeah, you never get like the showdown where they end up being in Frankie Navarro's mansion, and it turns out that all roads lead to him, and you get the face-off between our Murtaugh Riggs and our mobster. Never happens.
I would even argue that most people that end up dying in this movie, like you never get like the satisfactory killing. There's never like the one-on-one matchup of like the Osborn is gonna finally take out Drago later, or something like that. Like none of that happens. People just die randomly from random people or random driving into flaming semis or however they meet their untimely ends.
At some point in the middle of the movie, you have this Drago character who's supposed to be this badass hitman that they brought in to finish the job because, the local Texas hitman couldn't handle it. And Drago likes to cosplay and dressed himself as a fucking rancher. He thinks he looks like a cowboy, but I think he looks like a rancher. And they're driving around. It's three really ineffective hitmen in a car talking about their moms.
That's one of the greatest scenes of the movie.
Right. I'm like, they know this is a send up. They know how silly this is. It's this cutaway for a moment from all this action to say that where would we be without our moms?
I'm wondering, Pete, like if that's kind of like you were saying, right? Or like maybe a lot of this was the motion for the movie was like these more regular, consistent actors being like, guys, we have to kind of do something in this scene. Maybe we improv it a little bit, and these stuntmen who are there, just to really do the stunts are following the pace of the Hagens and the Smiths that are like, all right, well, you guys kind of chew up the scenery and we'll like go through glass.
Get away from that window, miss!
Why? What are you worried about?
Oh, and scenery is chewed in this movie, no doubt. Like, and yeah, I think you're 100% right, Bernie, because I think I saw in the credits that Ross Hagen was like an associate producer. And if you told me like that every line of his was just improv, I'd be like, yeah, I'd buy it.
Everybody's a prisoner on this mud ball. Only them poor dumb bastards don't know it.
Because I feel like he's just trying to come up with the most ridiculous one-liner he can in every given scene that he's in. And to kind of come back around to the scene in the car talking about their moms, there's the other scene where he like, his introduction of like getting out of his little tiny plane and like pulling it on the tarmac.
Mr. Drago, unlucky, this here's Hitch.
He's the least impressive bad guy ever. It's a little tiny plane. Like they're like, is that Drago? No. And it's like, seems like they're setting up like an airplane shtick again.
Yeah, that's him.
But it's not a joke.
Like I expected to see a huge man.
Yes.
Like, and it's just this older fucking guy in a hat. Pulling like a plastic plane. I was just, and then the first line, one of the first lines he has. So the hitman in all denim, the older guy who was supposed to like be the gruff one. He's like, with the Drago goes to drive the car, and he's like, careful, this thing is really hot. And Drago's like, so am I.
and then from that scene, they get to the first of, I want to say like every scene that follows is that this cat and mouse or like chase between the bad guys and the hitmen, and then the FBI agents and Carmen, where they just always show up regardless of what's going on, they always show up in the same place, even though like there's no way in hell that they would even know. And the first time this happens, the FBI guys and Carmen go to grab some food in this greasy spoon. No reason for the hitmen to know where they would be, but yet they show up there, and they're kind of like not really hidden, but they're behind like this lattice wood facade, and then they just start having like this dick measuring contest over like which prisons they've been in. And they just start naming prisons, and like Drago's like brag, Yuma. And that's how they start bonding. Like you could just tell, like they're just so happy to bond over the prisons. And of course, like the one guy, Lucky, is still kind of new to the game. So, boy, I can't wait to have the experiences that you guys have. But it's just like it's so random, basically waiting for these other dummies to finish their meal to try and, capture Carmen. They're just having this dick measuring contest about the hard lives that they've led. This is insane. And then I subsequently thought, I love every single second. But
I don't think I could get enough of Carmen like going down on that tuna fish club, like just putting fucking salt in pepper.
He was like, this looks delicious.
And she's like, can I get this? Can I get that? And she's like adding it all to this sandwich. And I'm like, if you eat that thing, you're going to have instant diarrhea, lady. Like I would have it when she takes a bite. And she's into her craft. I mean, the woman is into her craft.
Oh, totally. Yeah, she's very into.
She's probably the most well-adjusted of the group because she just saw her boyfriend love interest get shot after a 15-minute car chase where she also takes a car to try to save him. And she ends up basically having her ass like in the middle of like a downtown area, just out of the car while chased. So she's doing pretty well.
He was weird. He was crazy. Like he was making his life up as he went along.
And Pete, the second you said that, I thought this was only one little tracking device away from actually like all making sense. Like all you needed was one throwaway line from one of the henchmen saying, oh yeah, we put a little tracking device in the bag of diamonds. But it's Action USA. That's not what this movie is. It's not trying to make sense.
Drago knew where we were and where we were going all along, didn't he?
Yeah, it's not tracking device USA, Bernie. It's not make the plot make sense USA. It's Action USA. How about the disturbing thing of like when she gets out of the car because they've captured her, and the one dude, like, first of all, like, it must have been cold in Waco that day because this woman's nipples are like, piercing through her shirt. But the guy takes his revolver and like just like brushes it over her nipples. I'm
right. I forgot about that.
What move is that? What is that? What is this guy doing?
Only in the 80s can that shit even happen in a movie.
So, John, let's get into it. Let's talk about some of the scenes that struck a chord with you, because this movie, you said it's got all the tropes.
Well, the chase scene, the car chase scene in the beginning of the film is pretty well done for what it is. I have to give credit to like the director and the cinematographer, because even though it's a little nauseating where they like seem to put the camera on the front of the car sometimes or something like that, it's just fun the way they like show the action from different angles. But where it gets really silly to me and turns into like a pseudo Laurel and Hardy scenario is where they get up onto the sidewalk and then like every trope goes down with like 2 seconds where like they're like showing it from the car's angle and people are like having time to decide what they're doing with their bags. They just came out shopping and they're flinging them in the air. Garbage cans are being knocked over. There's a little tiny go-kart police vehicle that of course has to get trashed. And then my favorite, they had to have the guy on the ladder setting up a sign, and the ladder gets knocked out by the car and he's hanging by one hand. I mean, like you almost had every single car chase like shenanigan within 2 minutes, and I was loving every second of it for some reason.
The car chases had an air because there was so much emphasis put on like well done classic stunts. It transported me back to like Disney as a kid watching like the Indiana Jones stage show. Actors that vaguely looked like Indiana Jones and the characters and the sets were kind of like poor facsimiles of the actual movie itself. But yeah, I mean, it was just stuntorama. Like you mentioned earlier, Garmin's ass skimming off the ground, and I mean, that poor girl would have road rash up her crack for weeks if that had happened that way. Hopefully there was some padding in there for the actress or the actor who.
That's true. That could have been a stunt man with a wig on. That one scene, though, you're right, because Alan, that one part in the car chase where the two of the guys, they go out of the back window with the glass, the way it's shot is actually like really...
the camera's like pushing in on it.
Yeah. Like that just feels like an old-fashioned stunt. Nothing here except two cars going really fast. One of them's the person on the camera, and shit, that cameraman might be literally sitting on the hood of the car based on how this movie feels. And they're just trying to get the shot of those two actors popping out. It's well done.
So this movie is one of those movies where like everybody was sort of like, I really like Miami Vice and I really like Lethal Weapon. I want to add in, there was like some Dukes of Hazzard, right? Like,
yes,
Billy Ray in the beginning reeked of Dukes of Hazzard with the way he was driving and the way he was dressed. But the car chases looked a lot like a Steve McQueen movie, right? Like they had like a lot of elements of like the late 60s, early 70s. It was very grainy, like it just, this movie would morph into basically like, you know, whatever tribute they wanted to give it at that time.
Had a little Bullet, a little French Connection in there.
Yes.
You know, you think to like movies now, like Fast and the Furious movies, where you get like a lot of these like probably drone footage or like, you know, from like high up. So you get like the scope as you get like 5, 6, 7 cars like moving along like the highway. And this is all very much like almost like POV shots from like the hood of the car. So it's got that really, I don't know if gritty is the right word, but it really kind of throws you literally right into the action because you're right on like the bumper of the car in front. And as things are shifting, and yeah, it very much like the old school way of doing a lot of these stunts. I thought like a lot of them were like really impressive. Like my jaw almost dropped at the beginning with the helicopter scene where there's like that shot of the helicopter with the guy dangling from it, literally going down Main Street. And I'm like, okay, so clearly like they got permission to do this. And I don't know what safety measures they put into place. Probably not many, judging.
I had the same thing, Pete. I'm like, what small town allows you to like fly a helicopter that low, let alone with someone hanging?
Thought the exact same thing. And I was amazed because it's also a very long shot. It's a long scene. Some of that stuff was extremely impressive as the dialogue is not and the plot is not. Some of the action and the stunts were definitely impressive.
Like some seriously long falls from some of these stuntmen, like out of building, off the helicopter. Like
that's
this
right.
Shit was not like, you know, a couple of stories up. Like, and then, you know, and you see most of the fall, like you can even tell, like you can see the stunt person kind of looking and the way their body is contorting to be like, all right, so I'm going to land a certain way so that I'll hit the mat or whatever in a certain position. But it's still impressive because sometimes they're doing like a couple of like full body turns in the air. And it's just like, wow, I'm like, you know, and it's shot in slow motion. So you got plenty of time to really take it in. But I mean, super impressive just from the stunt standpoint.
I think too, the bar fight scene was like the stuntman's orgy.
I was salivating when they pulled up to the honky tonk. I'm like, I don't even know what's going to happen here, but yeah, it's great.
I was texting Pete while I was watching it, and of course, I was not feeling well too. But the second the honky tonk singer came on, like that was like the preview for where they were heading. I got psyched. I just knew it was going to be ridiculous, and it did not disappoint.
And the honky tonk singer may have been the most talented person in this entire movie. He was bringing it, and then out of nowhere, like. Fucking Carmen goes up there and ruins everything and starts belting it out.
In the middle of the fight, she decides it's time to sing a song.
It reminded me a bit of like a mashup of the Cowboy Bar from 48 Hours, which I want to talk about in a little bit with Eddie Murphy. And then like the Blues Brothers scene where they're just like at the honky tonk bar that has both kinds of music, Western and country, right? And like just like this feels like it's out of a comedy. But man, that's where the magic is happening, where you think you're serious, like you're pulling off the stunts well. When you think you're acting, this is hilarious. This is amazing to watch.
Oh, and you can tell like that woman like legitimately worked at that place.
Oh, 100%. Yep. Absolutely. Yes.
Do you mind if we use your honky tonk just to film some scenes? Like, okay, great. And they just, with the exception of the people that were in like the bar brawl, I think everyone else there was just probably there on a Thursday night looking to get their hoedown on. But
Gladys works the door, Pete, and Gladys is going to be in the movie.
Yes.
But to your point again, like between like the serious, not serious, when Panama walks in and like everyone, it's not like the record skip. You've got all these like these white cowboys like staring at him, and again, it's a point of view shot of everyone just kind of like dancing along, and then they see him and they stop and they do like the double take. That was obviously a choice. They could have probably played it up for even bigger laughs, but I'm like, well, that's legit funny because, you know, he's just kind of like, I just want some water, and like he's got to deal with this whole bar full of people that are giving him the side eye.
And then he ordered 16 peppermint schnapps, Pete.
That's right.
Yes, he does.
16 peppermint. That's a fucking choice, guys.
Did I mistake the fact that did he get thrown through the same lattice window like twice? Like
I think so.
So
Yes.
confused.
Yes.
He was jettisoned once, and then a second later, he was in the air again.
I think, John, no one like actually like sketched out like the geography of the bar and be like, this must be John, we were both mistaken. It was the lattice on the other side of the bar.
Right.
That's it.
When you think about the construction of that scene, though, right? They start the bar fight just like so to push the plot along, so Osborne can be taken by the bad guys, and Panama can get the shit kicked out of him, so the bad guys don't really see him, and he can be there to save Carmen and just push the movie a few merciless minutes forward.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, that's the payoff?
Yeah. Osborne does no one any favors by starting the bar brawl. Like, he's not saving his friend who still gets his ass kicked and his ass thrown through some wooden lattice windows. He himself gets kidnapped. And then Carmen just like, well, I guess this is my chance to go up and sing a few bars. So I'm just going to get up and sing.
Was that the end of her PTSD? I mean, she's about like 3 hours and she's over her like lovey boyfriend who got killed right in front of her.
Yeah, she's not. She had like a moment, and then her remorse over Billy Ray is gone.
Yeah, a little breath.
Or a person who trashed her Porsche and to save Billy Ray. She sure did move past his brutal murderous death.
Well, she did say that he was weird when they're interrogating her in the motel room, and she's like, "He was weird. You didn't know him.
He was weird. He was crazy. Like he was making his life up as he went along."
That scene to me was the most bizarre scene in the whole movie. Like the dialogue was everywhere, and at one point, Panama, who I think is the weirdest motherfucker in this movie, by the way, like he is.
That's
so
like, I said he's my favorite. Like
he's dressed in a navy blue silk suit with white tube socks and black sneakers on. But at some point he looks over at Osborne and he goes, "Never get Siamese food in Texas." And I'm like, so me and my wife looked up Siamese food, and the best we could come up with is food that you feed a Siamese cat.
You guys probably didn't see this. I saw it because I watched it again this afternoon.
You watched it twice, Pete?
You goddamn right I did, Bernie. At the end of the scene when Carmen sings her song and she does her little walk through like the row of people like high-fiving her, the guy who I'm assuming was in a legit band, the guitarist, tilts his head back as she's jumping off stage and hawks like this bright white loogie into the air. You've got to watch it again.
No.
There's no reason for it. I don't know how the hell I caught it, but he just like tilts his head back and I'm like, what the fuck?
I'm hoping this is like when we saw Silent Madness. And remember, we were both like, one, surprised we had not seen this movie. But then two, we're like, oh, whatever version we saw on Tubi or Pluto was actually a pretty good looking copy of the movie, like better than you kind of would expect. I think the loogie you saw was thanks to the good people at Vinegar Syndrome who remastered this. And I wouldn't be surprised. The version that's out there is probably a remastered movie. So that loogie, courtesy of Physical Media, #Physical Media.
And did some great acting, that loogie. He got good height.
Do you think he was having the same reaction that we all were watching Carmen try to sing?
My thought was like, this guy was like, this is my big chance. And they're going to have this actress come up and sing my fucking song. And so she's going to get the big applause. And I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to hawk one up on camera to kind of show my little rebellious disdain for this whole process.
So you think it was a protest loogie, almost like
I think it was definitely a protest loogie. Absolutely.
So from that scene to the one scene that I thought was the craziest, another car chase, because yes, there are a few. And they show these three people who are sitting on their front lawn and they're having a beer. And
God,
you know the scene, and it feels like this guy's over at like his sister's house. He works third shift and he hasn't had a day off in like 20 days. He's sitting on the front lawn in like the crappiest lawn chair that we all sat in. And all of a sudden this car drives through the house and takes out like 3/4 of the house. The guy who's in the car in the driver's seat's like, hey man,
Sorry about your house, buddy.
They step back because, of course, the house, which must have been filled with propane tanks or anything,
Everything blows up in this movie.
Explodes. So amazing, so like video game logic. That scene was amazing. And I actually legitimately felt bad for those people because I'm like, you ran through their house and then it blew up. Come on.
Yeah. And the guy's like, sorry about your house, and drives off, and then the house blows up.
They threw me a curve on that because when they showed the big guy, you get this feeling that something was going to go down and he was at least going to be able to intervene and get, maybe pull somebody out of a car, do something.
John, you were reading my mind because I'm like, he's going to pull the guy out of the car, maybe slow down the car chase, maybe get in the car and chase after these guys. Something ridiculous like that.
And speaking of explosions, another great explosion was like earlier in the film when the bad guys are chasing when Billy Ray and Carmen jump the school bus in the Porsche, and they're behind them, and they just go right through the RV. And as they fly through the RV, that RV just goes up in flames too. I guess
that's somebody's house. This is the thing about this movie, though, is the action. So in big budget action movies, right? So this movie is made like a year or two after Lethal Weapon, and is clearly.
Mm-hmm. Oh, like we're going to get into that one, Alan. We're going to get into that. Yes.
And it's, it like I said, it's, it's got a little Miami Vice to it, but it's like in those sort of movies and shows, the collateral damage happens in your periphery, right? Like, you're like, oh, if you actually like stop to think about it, you're like, who's paying for all this? In this movie, they kind of hover on like the catastrophes that happen around the action, and we're all left uncomfortable for it. When that Porsche jumped over the bus of school children and then just nosedived into the ground like 2 feet behind the bus, and you were like, well, that didn't go as well as they thought it was going to go, and they had one take, and now they're stuck with it. And you're just thinking to yourself, like, everyone's just going to stand there while they pull these two people who are probably dead from the car and kidnap them.
They have like random schlubby people just like walking up. They're like, why are they letting those people in the scene?
Speaking of, and they show up later at the honky tonk, but what the fuck was going on with the guy in the pink cowboy hat and the other dude dressed as like, the Bavarian like Alps festival person? Like, they're arguing by the bus, and then next thing you know, they're at the honky tonk later. And I want to say that they were foreign because I think the one guy was speaking, I couldn't if he was speaking German or something, whatever, but what the fuck were they doing in the movie?
I'll see you in hell. Look, everybody has a tagline in this movie before they die.
So many shouts in this movie. Everyone's yelling at one another, like they're cursing at each other. It's great. It's like half the dialogue is just people yelling.
John, something you had said earlier, which was the same thing I was thinking in watching the movie. This whole thing is like populated with an insane amount of tropes. I think recognizable because the actual movies that they were in. So I started making a list of all of these, of like the buddy cop genre, all these movies that legitimately inspired Action USA. 48 Hours, 1982, Eddie Murphy, Nick Nolte. Beverly Hills Cop, 1984, Eddie Murphy, Judge Reinhold. Running Scared, 1986, Billy Crystal, Gregory Hines. Lethal Weapon, which this movie takes a lot from, 87, directed by Richard Donner, Mel Gibson, Danny Glover. We get the Gary Busey as Mr. Joshua, which I think is like what Ross Hagen is trying to do with his Mr. Drago, but not very well. That one actually at least does have El Leon as a henchman. We get Red Heat, 1988, Belushi and Schwarzenegger. Collision Course, talk about pairings in 1989 with Pat Morita and Jay Leno. Tango and Cash, 89, Stallone, Kurt Russell. All the dog movies with partners, K-9, talk about Belushi, again, with his police dog in 1989, K-9, Turner and Hooch, Tom Hanks and his slobbery dog in 89, Showdown in Little Tokyo, Brandon Lee, Dolph Lundgren. 7, a little bit more serious, 1995, but it's still Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. 1988, Colors, Sean Penn, Robert Duvall. Training Day, Denzel Washington, Ethan Hawke. Also from it, David Ayer, End of Watch, 2012. Jake Gyllenhaal and Michael Pena. If those are the action ones, the send-ups, Dragnet, 1987, Dan Aykroyd, Tom Hanks. Hot Fuzz, 2007, Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, and Nick Frost. The Other Guys, 2010, Will Ferrell, Mark Wahlberg. Cop Out, 2010, Bruce Willis, Morgan Freeman. I think that was directed by Kevin Smith. 21 Jump Street, 2012, adaptation of the TV show. The Heat, 2013 movie with Melissa McCarthy and Sandra Bullock, directed by Paul Feig. The Nice Guys, 2016 movie as well. Movie that I know, Pete, that you love. Sticking in Action, Bad Boys in 95, Rush Hour in 98, Hobbs and Shaw in 2016. If you get into genre mashup, right, like sci-fi horror, Dead Heat in 88 with Joe Piscopo and Treat Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Will Smith, again, from Bad Boys to now Men in Black in 97 with Tommy Lee Jones. R.I.P.D. 2003, Ryan Reynolds, Jeff Bridges. Bright, Netflix movie from 2017 with Will Smith and Joel Edgerton, where it's like if fairies and like kind of like that world was real and how would that be policed. Alien Nation, where the LA cop gets partnered with literally an alien that's recently arrived on Earth, that then led to the TV series called Alien Nation, and to wrap it up, TV series that all we grew up with. That all this movie, I feel like when I was watching it again, I'm like, it's just grabbing from all of this stuff, right? Cagney and Lacey, Hunter, Jake and the Fat Man, Miami Vice, like you mentioned, Alan, Simon and Simon, Starsky and Hutch, Chips with California Patrols, of course, Ponch and John. So I was like, all right, all that stuff is like brought in to this movie, not always well, but like stuff that we all grew up on.
I think all of those movies that you just mentioned, this movie was an amalgamation of like stunts that are on the cutting room floor from choices that they made to not put in those movies and shows. I do like how it bounced. Like it really tried to go like ramrod action movie to like it would just stop and then become a buddy comedy. Like
Relax. Look, I'm with the FBI.
Talking about like how hard life is as an FBI agent. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I'd really like to ask some FBI agents if they just are left out to like vagabonds to fend for themselves for months at a time.
I'm just trying to do my job.
But I think one of the best parts of like when it became like almost like a bizarre like is all of a sudden Carmen has this vision of the ranch where the diamonds are. She's like, oh, he said something about that, and then we go back to the fact that he was talking about Holland in tulips, and finally she spits out,
wait a minute, I know that place. Billy Ray said something about Circle D Ranch.
Windmills. And they look up and there's like a toy pinwheel version of a windmill where the diamonds are hidden.
Look at these rocks.
But what that scene does is it sets up for the scintillatingly hot encounter where Osborne and Carmen, like all of a sudden, like we got to shoehorn the love interest in there. So when he saunters over, she's playing with the dog up against the fence, and he sits down. And all of a sudden, you get like the piano music comes in, and he's like, "Sorry, I'm so hard on you." And once he starts trying to emote, the dog that she's petting, like you see it, is just kind of like, "Oh, this motherfucker is going to start talking about his feelings. I'm getting the fuck out of here." The dog leaves. Walks out of the scene once he starts doing it.
I love, Pete, that your mouth wouldn't even let you say scintillating because you're like, nope.
And again, though, that scene gives us some more incredible dialogue because they're supposed to be emoting like their feelings for one another, where he's like, I'm gonna take you to the drop point tomorrow. And it's like, and then you're out of my life. And he's like, I've already gotten you killed 5 times over. She's like, I'm not ready to say goodbye. Are you? I'm not even sure I'm ready to say goodnight. Like, then don't. And he's like, but I got her, whatever. And
they should have slept together then. That like this is just a formula. Then you're supposed to show them either kissing on the bridge or then they sleep together. Whatever. That's you get your little montage.
But I have a quick theory because again, watching for the second time in 3 days, the opening credits listed screenplay by David Reskin with additional material by James J. Desmarais. Like, first of all, what additional material? And then I'm like, oh, I wonder if that guy was brought in to write the romance dialogue. I'm like, I feel like someone shoehorned in some of that shit, and that someone might be James J. Desmarais. Because like, why else would you get a credit for the screenplay that is not really a screenplay so much as it is just a series of shouts and one-liners?
Which kind of leads up to the last question I have for you guys. You've already watched this movie twice in 72 hours. And again, you're not at 100%. So to be fair, this whole thing could be a fever dream, both the movie and this conversation.
God, I hope so.
But now that you guys have experienced, because this is more of an experience, you've experienced Action USA. Where does this rank? Would you watch this again? How do you feel about it, especially compared to like all like the Mount Rushmore action movies from the 80s, like Lethal Weapon and Die Hard that we did grow up with? Where's Action USA? Alan, start it up.
So I'll admit it, I'm a geek. A movie geek. I'm a failed filmmaker as far as my dreams. But like when I was a kid, I wanted to make action movies, and Miami Connection basically was my childhood like dream of making a movie. So where Action USA comes in is like my teenage dream of making a movie. Like it's a little bit more like mature and put together and thought out. And shot better, and everyone's better looking, and there is like a beginning, middle, and end to it, but it's still just like a horny geek's idea of a movie, and I love it.
John, how about you?
I really enjoyed this movie so much more than I thought I would. I knew it was going to be action-packed because you had kind of, you had told Alan and I a little bit about it.
To be fair, John, the movie title kind of told you.
Yeah. No, but I mean, you never know if something's really going to deliver. But I was surprised how much I liked the action in the film. And then in addition to it, it's so rewatchable because I want to go back, remember, and like kind of absorb all of Drago's lines and all the different horrible dialogue. Including when they were in the car, my goddamn mother deserves the best, and no matter who I have to kill, she's going to live her life out in style.
Fucking poetry.
Pete, how about you? You've watched it now twice. Would you watch it a third time?
When do we stop recording? Yeah, no, this movie is so dumb and so fun. I would definitely watch it again. Like, it makes such little sense. The overdubbing of lines just had me laughing out loud. There's a scene towards the end when Drago's fighting Osborn, and Osborn's getting his ass kicked for like the third time in the movie. And Carmen again comes to the rescue and like finds like this 2x4 that's got nails sticking out of it and like whacks him with it. Again, it's overdubbed. Like it's not live dialogue from the scene, but he's just like, that nailed in it, you twat. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Where did that go from? In it. It's like ridiculous.
The best part, I think, about like being on this podcast and hanging out with you guys and talking about these movies is I didn't know that I liked watching really horrible action movies until I started doing them for this podcast. And now it's like I want you guys to tell me to like give me another recommendation so we can go back and do this again.
Yep.
Because it's so much fun to watch these movies.
Again, I'm just glad that you guys finally watched this. So next time someone says, hey, I need a really crappy movie, you're like, I've got one for you. It's Action USA.
Fuck. You're not so lucky now, asshole.